On May 3, 2022, Gil Hanse discussed the Colonial Country Club course renovation project at Hillwood's Circle T Ranch in Westlake with Chris Solomon of No Laying Up. Here's part of that interview.
There's one project, there's only one that keeps you up at night. Which one is that one and why is it?
It's Colonial. We were threading the needle there with the timing of the tournament and just trying to aim that last putt's going to drop May, whatever, and we've got to get grass down, we've got to get that place back in together by the end of August. And people talk about, you've got a year, well actually we don't. We've basically got 6 months where the grass is going to grow. And so once we hit December, kind of all the way back through April, it's going to sit there, look at us, and hopefully it's looking good before it goes to bed. So it's one of those projects that I know we're going to do everything we can in the planning, we're going to do everything we can in the execution, but you're going to have to get Mother Nature to cooperate on that one. So we had this conversation when we came to the Olympic course in Rio, and we kept getting slowed down, and it was like, well, it's not like we have to be done by a certain date. Yeah, we had to, because the Olympics are coming. This we have to be done. We're not going to be able to look at the golfing world and go, oops, we didn't get this right. So I have every confidence it's going to happen, but it's not just the perfect slam dunk.
What is Colonial going to look like for those that aren't familiar with the plans for the work you're going to be doing? What will look different when we see it on TV the next year?
I think it's much like what we talked about here. It's going to have a much more of a sense of place, like it belongs in sort of a river area alongside of in Texas. And I think it has evolved over time, to where it looks now. It's a much more formal landscape. I had lunch with Dan Jenkins several years ago before he passed, and he talked about Colonial being a dark golf course when he first played it, because there were so many trees and you're kind of hitting through and into tunnels. And I think it may be the place where we're actually going to plant trees, and we want to make sure that we don't take away from the way it identifies players right now who are really good at ball striking. And we don't want to create something where the bombers are going to take over. We want to make sure that we retain all the qualities, playability-wise, that the Colonial has, but we transform the look. We get this historic renovation to the project, where a lot of the old photographs that we see from 1941 U.S. Open give us indications of what it looked like and how it was presented, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that.
How often are you planting trees during renovation?
Not very often.
Is that something that'll make Colonial a little bit different?
Yes, I think it will. And I think we're being really strategic about how we're doing that and where we're putting them, because obviously you've got economic concerns. Growing bent grass in this part of Texas is not easy, so we've got to make sure that we give the superintendent every chance to succeed. But I think where we can tighten up some corridors, or at least make sure we retain the precision required to play that golf course, we'll do it.
You do a lot of work in the renovation business and the restoration business. Those lines can be a little blurred at times, but you're often asked to restore classic golf courses to what they once were. What's that process like for something like Colonial that has a history that is many different chapters along the way that have helped shape to what it is currently? But what is that balance like of trying to restore certain things, yet at the same time take some liberties into enhancing the design in some way as you see it?
Yeah, I think that Colonial has been one of the more interesting exercises, because generally you can kind of walk in and here's the history and here's the architect and that's where we go. And this sort of misnomer that it's a Perry Maxwell golf course, it's not. And so many architects have had influence over it, so we need to pick a time and a place that seems right and not go all the way back to that, but at least take bits and pieces of the presentation of the golf course, lowering greens, taking away some bunkers, getting a more rustic and rugged feel to the property. So it's not as if, it's not like a Wingfoot project where we said, okay, W. Tillinghast, let's look at the opening day photographs, it's consistent all the way through. We're taking a history of an architectural history that is not consistent, and we're trying to figure out how we can make it consistent. Because when we look at Colonial right now, there are inconsistencies throughout it. You've got some of these beautiful golf holes that hug the land, and then you've got brick walls or stone walls, and you've got formalized plantings and bunkers that are formalized. And I think what we really talk to the membership about is, let's make this a consistent course in the way it plays and the way it's presented from wall to wall, but utilizing the history or the great history of Colonial to give us that image.
What's the balance like between, we're going to see a lot of the golf courses you've done work on this year in major championships and obviously the PGA Tour with Colonial. What's the balance like? I understand there are some Colonial members in the audience today, so the balance of when you are doing work on the course, how much you're thinking about the everyday member and how often you're thinking about the tour pro that comes in once a week and plays a very different game. Is that getting more challenging as time goes on? And how does for Colonial specifically, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because the disparity between the average golfer and tour pro, or even the accomplished amateur and tour pro, is just growing. I mean, it gets worse and worse every year. We're seeing that, and until something happens with the equipment, we're going to continue to see that. So our focus on most of those restorations is on the original architect and their intent and what they did and how they presented the golf course. And what we have found is that when we trust a Ross or a Tillinghast or a Rayner, they almost always got it right. And so we can trust their judgment in the way, even a course that was built in the teens, 20s, 30s, still is relevant today with some upgrades and changes to it. So our focus is always on that. Now at Colonial, we understand that the tournament has provided most of the identity for it, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure we provide something that the members are going to be proud of and enjoy playing. And I think a lot of the alterations there are going to yield situations where the members are going to enjoy the golf course more, lowering the greens, removing some bunkers, creating more bump and run opportunities, but the pros are never going to look at those options. They don't look at bump and run, it's an aerial game to them. So it's going to hopefully make the golf course more enjoyable, playable for a second in the membership, and really not impact the difficulty as it's related to the tour.
So do you have a favorite hole today at Colonial, or maybe one that's your least favorite, and do you see that changing when you are done?
Favorite hole? It's probably, I think 8 is going to be the biggest change, and I think it's going to be the biggest positive change. I'm not a big fan of number 8 as it sits right now. Favorite hole? I think 5 is like a world-class golf hole, and I think that one's going to get much better as well.
Great story about the 5th hole at Colonial, if you will. Steve Elking said that Lee Trevino one time teed off on that hole, hit a nice cut down the fairway, and the other 2 guys in his group still had to play the shot. And he did it really loud to make sure everyone else in his group could hear it right before hitting the hardest shot on the course. Can't believe I hit that fairway. That's the smallest fairway in the world. How did I hit that?